We've changed the order slightly. I'll do my presentation first, obviously because I'm here. But Chris has very kindly earlier today recorded his presentation. So we're going to try to do a playback of that recording with his presentation slides. And then we'll switch back to Thea. And that kind of explains why I've got a picture of Back to the Future on this agenda slide, because in a sense we're going to be in present, then we're going to go back about 5 or 6 hours to hear from Chris, and then we're going to come back to the present again to hear from Thea. So, so hopefully that sounds like a slightly unusual format, and as we are recording this, and we're going to be playing a recording and recording that makes this even more interesting. If anyone else has any questions, do feel free just to drop in the chat. I'll try and keep a track of that as well. So hopefully that all seems quite clear. I wanted to talk a little bit about a GCRF funded project that that myself and my colleagues Frida Wolfenden and Nida Adenolfi, who are based in Wales, have been undertaking over this last year. It's one of the projects related to knowledge exchange, and hopefully some of that will come out later on. And this builds on the work that we've all been involved with over the last 3-4 years on the TESS India project. So this is kind of a development and a progression on from that piece of work. As the title suggests, we're interested in digital badges. We take quite a broad take on the digital badge, and I think one of the things for us is thinking about how the digital badge performs as an assessment technology, and how it is almost, I guess, unique in so many affordances and some of the ways in which it could be used in teaching and learning. Maybe some ways in which are broader than often used at the moment. I'm not going to tread a lot of the well-worn ground around what a digital badge is. I'm hoping that most people here have got a reasonable understanding of that, and especially when I'm talking about digital badges, I'm mainly thinking about open digital badges, of course, but the distinction is not always necessarily not necessary, really. So here's just a very quick definition, just to remind ourselves. Digital badges, a method of recognising and displaying skills, achievements, knowledge, qualities. And with the open badge structure, it allows one to link back to the evidence, and so the learner will upload or provide a link to the evidence when applying or being awarded the badge. And also the criteria is generally publicly available, which means that people can see how and why the badge was issued and on what criteria that was done. So essentially, it's a form of assessment, clearly, and learners earn these badges, which they can then share and value, both in respect to the conventional ways, but also across social media and others. So within this presentation, I'm just going to very briefly set the scene for the project, talk a little bit about digital badges for teacher education in India, which is our project, and then just a few points about progress that we've currently made over the last year, and also some things around next steps. So to set the scene, I think I first encountered digital badges back in 2013, and I know probably a couple of other people attending today may be aware of some of our early work we did around the Learning Design MOOC, which we got some JISC funding for, and we back then tried a suite of 9 badges, which filter a range of different kinds of aspects of badges. And I think from a lot of that work, what we see is that, and from the literature since, that digital badges can perform a myriad of functions. That they have a whole load of different purposes, which is a pro. It gives you a lot of space, a lot of scope. And secondly, as I said, digital badges are a distinct assessment tool. They could be an innovative assessment tool, depending, I guess, on how we use it. And digital badges also have that potential to scale, which is something that is really interesting, especially in respect to assessment, because assessment does have an awful lot of both of time overhead in it, and also that tends to also limit the scale, because there's a proportional relationship between the amount of time one invests and how many people, I guess you can award them or you can assess. On the flip side of that, I think these pros are also cons. Because as digital badges can perform a myriad of functions, it also means that it's sometimes very difficult to get everyone on the same page in terms of thinking about how you are going to use them. And I think a lot of people, when they talk about this, tend to bring preconceptions about where they have used or encountered badges before. So that might be the Scouts badges, if you like. It could be badges from video games. It could be the kind of badges that one associates with positions of either authority or of status. So all these different things come together, and I think this sort of common use of what badge can be makes it sometimes difficult to then be able to really develop some very technical uses of that. And as well as being a pro, obviously a con is being distinctive and different as an assessment tool. It actually requires an awful lot more work because one forgets how many assumptions are made around the deployment of a piece of assessment and the recognition of that assessment that one does. So having something which is slightly different again disrupts that. And also upon the fact that digital badges can be awarded at scale, that is also a challenge because it introduces a whole new level of considerations that aren't necessary when one's doing things assessment longhand, I guess, if you want to call it that. I may just drop this in very briefly, but this is just a recap back from the old SMOOC where we had a number of different types of ways in which we awarded badges and different types of badges. What I want to do really is on this slide, which is setting a bit more of the scene, if you like, is that I think firstly we've recognised and certainly we feel from what we've done that badges often are most often used in times of a surrogate for a certificate of achievement or something along those lines, or for a particular piece of activity. And I think there are definitely good examples of using these in a much more rich way. Secondly, I think that often there's a focus on the summative rather than the formative functions of badges, and also the use of badges with students and learners, and obviously with the work that we're doing, which is focused on teacher education and of the training of the teacher educators, so those people who train the teachers. We see less of that. Again, there are some examples. There was a good presentation I went to a couple of months ago, an education department in Finland, who've been doing this with teachers, but on the whole, you often encounter it in respect to the learners. And also, I guess, this focus on the systems and processes rather than on assessment pedagogy, which is essentially how you use learning design to design the badge system itself. And there's relatively less on how badges have been used once issued. So there's a lot of stuff on actually just getting the processes in place rather than necessarily on looking at use. And finally, and again, this is where our project in India is really interesting, is because there's less work which is done on low to medium income countries, and obviously those present quite different challenges. So there's a very quick slide trying to sort of begin to prize out this this notion of badges of learning, I guess, on one hand, and badges for learning, which is a very conventional way of thinking about assessment in a number of different ways, but I think it works quite well when thinking about badges. And the third piece of the scene setting is really more specific to the Indian context. So the National Education Policy, which has come out in the last couple of months, really stresses that the need for effective teaching practice and classroom pedagogic knowledge, and that this needs to be improved, and there's a recognition of that across the country. And there's also provision within that of needing to deliver a certain number of hours of teacher training now that all teachers should have. So there remain barriers to engaging in sustaining teacher commitment and getting teachers engaged in their professional development, which of course presents those challenges and has opened up some space for us to think about how digital badges could be used there. But also digital badges are relatively unknown and poorly understood in both the policy and the education context. So we see there as an opportunity to shape the debate there, as well as looking at specific ways of implementing this and supporting educators. And And therefore, this project, which we're now working on, first took shape from a 3-day symposium that we held last year in Delhi, which was held on the back end of the TESS India project, where we invited principally teacher educators and other educators who've been involved in TESS India from 3 states to come along and to really discuss and work through some of the initial challenges around badges. And from that, one of the activities was to think about how badges could be designed into existing curricula. So that screenshot on the left is an example from one of those groups. And as I say, there's a paper on RO where you can look at this in a bit more detail. We also analysed that workshop output to look at the various themes which were coming out, and this is only really a beta diagram, but there are a number of things around both personal recognition, identity and sense of practice as a teacher, aspects relating to inspiration and the sharing of practice, and also the underlying necessity of feeling that this needs to be aligned with policy and governing structures. So that really has helped set up the project today, and we are currently working with Tata Institute of Social Sciences, which is based, has a number of sites, but the team that we're principally working is based in Mumbai. It's a split site. There's the older site is now situated in these, as you can see, in these lovely almost forested area, which is in Mumbai itself, and then they also have the second campus, which is a lot more brand new and shiny. I visited there last summer as part of the setup process, and then we've been developing the project since. And we have 4 project goals. The first one is to conduct and report research findings, and these are the findings from making direct course interventions. When I say course, one of them is a course, and the other 2 are more networks. To develop a framework for local use and adoption of digital badges, and the focus here is on local use and the importance of making sure that this is relevant and tailored to the needs of educators in the country. Thirdly, to stimulate and inform policy debates, and then finally to build expertise for effective implementations. And to that end, we've been working with some of the developers of TIS. TIS have something called the TISX platform, which is a variant, I guess, of another well-known platform. But this has allowed us to do some interesting work to develop ways of awarding badges through the use of that system. So our pilot studies involve, well, we have 3 at the moment. The first one is a course on online learning for school education. This was a response that we've been developing this already, and then COVID-19 came along. So this then became one of the initial responses that TIS made to COVID, and we implemented digital badges on this course. The second one was a teaching and learning community of practice, which again had to go online and encountered a number of other challenges, again due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And the third area where we've been using these has been in the Master Education Network, which is work that TIS have been doing with the Sam State. So they're beginning to build up a network of master educators, if you like, and each of those have been awarded with a badge. We had a rather nice presentation ceremony the other week where the Principal Secretary of the State Ministry came along, which was good both from that point of view, but also for raising visibility of digital badges with them. So progress so far, we have undertaken these 3 implementations at TIS so far. We meet every week, so we've undertaken an awful lot. There's been a lot of discussion, especially over the last 5 months, around this knowledge exchange, both the effective learning design considerations of using badges, understanding the context, understanding the educational needs, and the way in which states respond and their expectations and ambitions in respect to the newly issued National Education Policy. We've, as I mentioned, done some development around it with the TISX platform with their software developers to help detect and award badges using Badger. We are already beginning to pick up on some evidence of cascade. So there was one of the participants has since begun to start using digital badges with her classes, and we have policy interest from the state of Assam for a potential new piece of work. And another key thing that we've done is to develop a survey instrument, which is very lightweight, not too many questions, but is intended to probe perceptions of value, motivation, and need with respect to teachers' professional practice, what they're looking for with respect to recognition, self-identity, career progression, and their needs. And we've already had over 100 responses from that, so that looks like it will be a very interesting data set to analyse going forward. And in respect to my final slide, next steps for the project, we're currently working on an interim report, which we hope to have ready in the next month or two. And we are planning an event in November, late November, where we will be inviting policymakers from a number of states, educators and faculty, and also teacher practitioners. It should be a one-day event with a number of different sessions and workshops where we both will be sharing our research findings, but also trying to promote discussion, debate and reflection on this aspect. And then also, obviously, we're both looking at further research publications and exploring further funding opportunities as well on top of that. So I think I've just about kept to my 15 minutes. I hope that was really useful. Maybe we can pick up on any questions which, oh sorry, you're right, 2020. Yes, yes, November 2019. Thanks, Jackie. Yeah, that would be a real challenge. Although probably keep, yeah, I was going to say keeping up with the Back to the Future kind of thing. You know, it would be great to be able to go back to November 2019 because we could actually go out there and do it in person, or at least be there in person rather than doing it online. Yeah, so 2020, thank you for that. So I'm not sure if there's any quick questions. Maybe I could take those now, just as we set up Chris's recording, perhaps. Welcome, Chris, from 6 hours ago. So Chris is a lecturer in IET, and he's going to tell us about another project which has been taking place over the summer, but this time based in Africa. So maybe this might be a semi-seamless handover to Chris, so let's see how he goes.
Hello, I'm Chris Edwards. Thank you very much for allowing me to talk to you today. I'm sorry I can't be there, but I'm going to be in a research project meeting this afternoon. So I was asked to talk about a couple of activities that have taken place within IET, not the only ones taking place, to do with assessment. And one of them is to do with a recent presentation I gave to the university's Africa Pathways project, and that ran over the summer, and it had a whole series of webinars and online materials for teachers and lecturers across Africa to engage with, to help them really cope with the issues they were finding about having to move to online teaching. So I can talk about the webinar that I gave on assessment, but also a little bit towards the end on a project that was to do with assessment, online assessment, and it was to do with the authentication of students and their work. And that was a project called Tesla that finished early last year. So I'll leave my camera on for now because that might be useful, but I can see my image might be in the way, so we'll see how that goes. So this was the first slide for the online assessment webinar I gave to the African and Pathways project, and you can see there's several organisations involved: the African Council and TESA, as well as IET within the OU. for this webinar, there were 300 people that signed up to attend. Not everyone did. I think probably about half managed to. Obviously, some people have commitments that crop up, but we also found that whenever we were meeting with people in Africa, that often participants had intermittent access problems to the internet, would drop out or disappear, maybe come back, or just not make it at all. So well, we could see firsthand what issues there are and to do with working within Africa. We host it within Zoom. It seemed to be preferred by the majority of participants. So I wasn't exactly sure what level to start with, so we just looked at some of the basics of why we assess and what we assess and how and when. I'm going to send the PowerPoint as well separately, so if I go too quickly through anything, then you've got the slides and you can just hold a slide on anything if you want to look at it for longer. So that the different kinds of assessment, obviously formative and summative, that we're very familiar with, as an opportunity to give feedback to individuals or a group, and try and ensure engagement with the course, and that's one way in which the OU uses assessment. Obviously reviewing progress of a whole cohort, and giving learners confidence. So that these were some main things that we included. We included a couple of polls within the webinar. The Zoom allows for that, and so the first one was just to see how people were engaging with different types of assessment. And when I went back to look at and get the results of that poll, I found that they weren't there, so I don't know how to get those. But from memory, there was a good spread in the responses across all of those options. Sorry, I think I went on too many then. So what we assess, the importance that we have of assessing against clear learning outcomes, so declaring what you're going to be assessing up front, being transparent about that, and not hiding it behind layers of other information. So, and being clear about how we will assess and how we will mark. So that the whole idea of constructive alignment, essentially. So how we assess the different kinds of statements, low stakes and high stakes, informal and formal, formative and summative assessments, a criterion referenced or norm referenced. So all of these are different scales, effectively, that assessment can sit on. And we try and use a range of different kinds of assessment, and we're encouraging people to use different kinds of assessment because it enriches learning. So when we assess, and the idea of assessing before we teach is kind of an evaluation to see where people are in their understanding, to establish where to start, what you need to teach, obviously during a teaching session to see how it's going, as follow up at the end of a topic to see how people have got on, and obviously the end of term or semester and course assessment to establish what learning has taken place, whether people can demonstrate that they've meet the learning outcomes. So that's assessment in the round. Thinking about taking assessment online, we can obviously use the internet for submission of assessment, so you can prepare your assessment somewhere else and then just use the internet to upload it. We can use the internet for hosting the assessment, so for students actually working online and completing their assessment. We look at some issues surrounding that, and then just give another option of a project within Africa that used mobile phones and text messaging as a form of assessment, rather than using the internet, so using the mobile networks. So submitting assessment online, the idea that a student completes the assessment, they might need to digitize it, it might not be digital to start with, and then they need to go to a portal and upload. It allows you to more or less cover any kinds of assessment that you want to cover. and the teacher will then mark and return the feedback. That's the basic model. Embedding online, you've got online tools you need to employ, probably use a virtual environment of some kind. So student will complete within the environment, and again, there's many forms of assessment available that we can use within those, but you need to gain that expertise of building things within the virtual learning environment. So the issues, how much students will work together or with others. Many students are isolated, so they don't have that option, but some are, and some may collaborate, and it's the same problem that we all have. And how do we know that submitted work is the students, essentially? So solutions, suggested an open conversation with students. So I called it viva voce, but having that's a kind of last resort, because it involves one teacher and one student, or spending time together talking. So having a discussion, you can relatively quickly establish whether a student actually knows what they're talking about, knows the work, and get an established of understand if that's their own work. So one way of managing that is by saying that you'll choose people at random to do this, and that might help ensure that people don't collaborate and do produce their own work, or do collaborate perhaps in terms of ideas but not in terms of finished work. One of the reference down the bottom was from some research which tended to show that quite often students cheat because they believe others are cheating, and they don't want to be left behind. They don't want to be seen as the people that are left out and failing because others are doing really well. And so that avoiding that, and by encouraging people to play by the rules and to develop good academic practice, is important. And that's one thing that Tesla might address, and we'll come on to that in a minute. So resilience, will the technology still exist next time round? Will it still work next time round in whichever environment people are in? And will the internet always be accessible? So they're issues that many people face. So we had a second poll, and we asked the teachers what kind of staff tutor or student teacher ratios they had, and we put a range down there, and we actually, I mean, obviously in the OU we might have 15 or 20 or 25 to 1 throughout our courses, and it's a scalable model, so that's what we retain. However, it's defined for each individual module. But we found from that poll, and again I can't find how to get hold of those data, but from the poll I can remember that there was a disturbingly or dauntingly large number of proportion of people with very large groups. So I think that will completely change the way in which you engage with online using the internet for assessment. So this was the example of text messaging. It's there, the link's there if you want to follow up on that, then do. Then we went into breakout rooms, and the 150 or so people were divided up, and we had probably 10 in each room, perhaps a few less, and looked at the main barriers for assessing students online and the solutions, what would help overcome them. And the kind of barriers that I could go through the chat, that wasn't lost, so I went through the chat yesterday, and these were the kind of barriers that they shared, and a lot of which I found I misspelt loneliness, so sorry about that. A lot of them we would be familiar with and wouldn't be surprised at. I'll go on. And these were some of the solutions that they came up with. Government featured quite strongly there. They felt the government should be involved in supporting and providing resource. And probably the government would be the main player to actually achieve the change that is needed to make online assessment work well in a number of countries. So, and there's the other list of items that they gave. I won't dwell on those again because I'm conscious of time. Some of the other questions they asked were to do with the levels of ICT around in different countries, that a lot of people just don't have access to it. And in fact, if you can move people to an institution or a room where a facility where they do have access and can complete the online assessment, they quite often haven't got the keyboard skills or the skills that enable them to make good use of that. So there's a lot of familiarity, a lot of training that really needs to be going on. They were very concerned about what the optimum class size was for an effective assessment, and obviously I think perhaps it works the other way around. I mean, we obviously have a sense within the OU of what an optimal class is, but that looked like it was probably impractical for large groups of people. So I think the answer to that is they'd have to find a way of developing assessments that fit whatever circumstances and environment they were in. So the idea of how teachers can cope with facilitation, I think I understood this one. I think because this was in a group that I wasn't in, but that high rate of data consumption in countries like Nigeria, I'm presuming they're talking about people just going on social media and they're used to all of that, and how a teacher can compete with that effectively. So types of questions that are suitable, there's obviously a lot of, I suppose, tacit knowledge that we've developed over the years that people would have to gradually build up through practice and seeing what works for them in their circumstances. It's a good question. Is it possible to assess a new skill gained in a practical session and to do it synchronously? Well, it would be, of course, but with a lot of the issues that people express, that might not be a sensible way of going forward for now. And a similar question that they want: how do they manage to do practical aspects of STEM? So in particular, so those I think are questions to be followed up or to be worked through in some way. So that was the summary of the webinar with the African teachers and lecturers. This now is just a few slides looking at Tesla, which is embedding an e-authentication approach to online assessment. And through the project, which had 7 universities collaborating as partners, but a wider partnership of businesses and others that led to, there were 18 partners altogether. And basically the idea was that if we could imagine that we'd be certain that a student's work that they submitted was actually their own, then it would free us from so many of the constraints and issues and questions that we have surrounding assessment, and it would give many more opportunities for a greater variety of assessment. There are essentially 5 tools. There's 4 pictures, but 5 tools. And so there's face recognition, voice recognition, plagiarism detection, so like Turnitin that we use, and forensic analysis, which is actually looking at the way in which you use language and learning the way you use language, and looking to see if some work that you've submitted uses language in that way. So that's something that we haven't done until now. So that's quite interesting. Keystroke patterns. So if you're actually working and doing assessment online, then you're typing in real time and can be measured. Sorry, it can be measured in real time, and you tend to use a keyboard in your own particular way. Again, you'll have your own pattern of using keys, and any assessment that you do, that pattern can be checked with the patterns that have already been registered against your identity. And so these were sort of 5 tools. Some are very much biometric, the facial recognition and voice recognition, and the others are perhaps less intrusive, and obviously plagiarism detection is something that our students are familiar with anyway. So this was the numbers of students and teachers involved through 3 pilots over 3 years. It was significant numbers. And the students had a positive experience. Well, more than half the students did. 70% of students felt there were key advantages in using these tools, which could be brought in just as necessary for each assessment. So you might just use one tool, it might just use facial recognition, or you might bring several of the tools in together for another type assessment, and the student would be alerted and would be asked to allow those, so that it's completely transparent. So forensic analysis and anti-plagiarism were seen as being the least intrusive and therefore the most acceptable to students, and facial recognition and voice recognition least so. And we don't know how much of that is to do with the fact that there's a lot of talk, or there certainly was a lot of talk in the media about having video cameras everywhere and state surveillance and that kind of thing, and so that might help shape people's response. And so partly being very clear as an institution how we use these data and what we don't do with these data and how transparent we are is actually key to getting students' acceptance of these. So staff were understandably probably more satisfied because they're not the subjects of this for a start, but they definitely benefit from this. They definitely saw it as being a way of increasing trust in assessment and in students' work. And just finally, there's a number of publications so far that you can access and read on this, and all the links are in the PowerPoint, and I think most of them, if not all of them, are available on RO. So I'll stop there. I'm happy to answer any questions that you want to email to me, because I'm sorry again I can't be with you, and I hope the rest of the session goes well. So thank you very much.
Okay. We may that might be Chris finishing possibly. So thanks, Chris, for that. We're running a few minutes behind time, of course, but maybe if I can invite Thea now to talk about her work, and while we might not necessarily have much time for the open floor before 3 o'clock, maybe I would suggest that if for those of you who can, let's say we run a little bit into the next hour, so we can have some discussion afterwards. And for those who need to leave because they have another meeting, perhaps there's an opportunity to use the chat box to share or to mention projects which they're aware of. So I think we're going to switch back to Thea's presentation, and Thea, maybe I can ask you to take the floor.
Yeah, hello. Thanks, Christina. Oh, now speaking, great. Well, hi again. Well, I will be quite brief and short. I'm going to talk you about the initial insights we have from the evaluation of the new marking and feedback tool. To place this into context, this activity is part of the exams and assignments implementation program. The aim of this program is to replace the existing ETMA system. Not sure whether you know of it or you're familiar with that. That's the system we are currently using to upload assignments, students to upload assignments and teachers to mark and provide feedback. And also expand the capabilities of exams and assignments. The vision of this program is to provide a secure, robust, and flexible platform that can actually help improve student experience. The focus at the moment of this activity, which is the first we've done, is to replace and improve the assignment submission, the process of marking and feedback. So the new tool that will be introduced in the future is called WiseFlow, and is offered by UniWise. So if you want to find out more about the program in general, I suggest you contact either Maria Cantiru, which is the project manager of the exams and assignments program, or have a look at the project website. It's really very well organized and has most of the information you may need. That's the address of the project website. So what we did in this first phase of evaluation, we tried to understand how associate lecturers are using the new marking tool, WiseFlow. Also, we tried to understand whether and how the tool aligns with OU processes of marking, and also identify possible gaps or challenges we could improve in the system. So our two main questions were to capture how the system is used by ALs and also identify the challenges that they may face when they are using the system in an effort to improve its design before it goes live and used by ALs. So in brief, the process, we had 37 self-selected ALs. We made a purposive selection based on a mixed background and experiences. Those 35 people had 1 hour familiarization with WiseFlow just to get a sense of how the system works. And then they were asked to mark and provide feedback to 3 TMAs. When they finished their marking, they completed a questionnaire with a set of open and closed questions. We analyzed the questionnaire, and based on the analysis, we selected 18 of them for follow-up interviews and cognitive walkthroughs. The idea here was to get the in-depth insights from those who said in the questionnaire that they were facing particular challenges with the system. And then we analyzed the data using thematic analysis and some statistical tests. One of the things we had in the questionnaire was to understand or get an overall understanding of how the tool is perceived by ALs. And for this purpose, we used a standardized questionnaire from the Unified Theory of Acceptance and Use of Technology. I won't go into details about the technology. I just want to comment on the general picture of what those 35 people thought of the system. So overall, their anxiety when they are using the system was relatively low. And on the other hand, they had the high intention of using the system in the future. In the rest of the factors, they were average or positive, which indicates that overall, generally, they were positive with using this new marking tool. Although I have to say that this was just the general picture. We wanted to go into the details of the problems or challenges ALs face, and that's why we had open-ended questions in the questionnaire, and also we had the follow-up interviews that gave us a more rich understanding of what the ALs are doing with the system and what problems they may be facing. So one of the questions in the questionnaires was about what the advantages of WiseFlow are, and they commented on the easy management of marking within a single online environment. So with this new tool, there is no need to download the assignments, mark them, zip them, and upload the files. Also, they commented really positively on the comments they can provide to students, saying that they were visually stimulating, as they could use different colors, stamps, and drawing. Also, they really like the idea of providing audio feedback. It's a new possibility for providing feedback and as a way to communicate their messages through intonation, for example. And overall, they found navigation easy and intuitive. In terms of the challenges they face that were related to the design of the system or possibly glitches in the system that we could improve. They face some problems with the precision of the highlight functionality. They would like to see more dynamic, I would say, comments and annotations, like movable, numbered, or have more formatting options. And they also wanted to have an undo facility there. In terms of the rubric, they were not sure how to use that, and also they faced some issues when loading this feature. The calculation of marks, they would like to have a way to automatically add marks up between different sections of an assignment, for example, and a functionality that checks that this addition is correct. And also they had some loading issues with the audio feedback and the quality of the recording. Now, in terms of features that they felt they were missing from the tool, was a space to write notes, either handwritten notes the moment they are reading the assignment, or some generic feedback they would like to give across all students. Also, they asked for help to understand how highlighting works and how to use the rubric. In particular, they also commented on editing the text of the TMA. They said that editing the text directly is a way to model effective writing, and this is particularly useful in disciplines like literature, history, and languages. Also, they would like to be able to cut and paste in the body of the assignment things like a diagram or an SPSS output. In addition to that, some AS faced issues related to accessibility. They had special requirements of using software like read-to-text or speech-to-text, and this software was not compatible to WiseFlow. And finally, we had some requests for being able to work offline. Just to clarify here that the instructions we gave them was to complete the activity within WiseFlow, as this was the purpose of the activity. Yet 3 of them out of the 35 said that they would like to be able to do that, as a lot of the times they work on the go and they may not have a good quality internet connection. Now, the interview analysis with those 18 people who faced particular challenges confirmed, I would say, overall the insights we got from the questionnaires. And in addition to that, we got more information about how they are marking. For example, one of the things that came up was that assignments could be submitted in varied formats, like Word documents, statistical software outputs, or PowerPoint presentations. The caveat here is that at the moment WiseFlow is accepting submissions in the form of a PDF, and they are asking whether students will be able to submit assignments in a different format. Also, they commented on their approach to providing feedback. It's what they call the feedback sandwich. So they give positive comments at the beginning, then the more negative, I would say, comments, and they close up their feedback with, again, a note to how the students can improve their assignments in the future. And this was actually very well accommodated by WiseFlow. The other thing that again related to how they provide the feedback is by annotating the text. And here they commented again that this is an opportunity to teach students how to write or how to express themselves or how to structure their assignments through modeling. And this is not supported at the moment by WiseFlow. As a very positive feature, they found the fact that WiseFlow can enrich existing feedback strategies. So, for example, they said that the color coding of comments could be a nice way to indicate different types of mistakes. For example, conceptual comments may be, red, or reference-related comments may be highlighted in blue. And they thought that this is a nice way to help students understanding feedback. So we have now completed this first phase of the evaluation, and we are discussing on how we can focus on more faculty-specific assessment of the tool. So we're in the planning stage at the moment. Just to say that with us is Maria Cantiru. So if you have any questions about the program per se, I'm sure she will be more than happy to answer these. Or alternatively, you could always email the team or get in touch with me. And thank you for that. Happy to answer any questions.
That's brilliant. Thanks very much, Thea, and also for getting that in just as we're turning into 3 o'clock. So for those of you who do need to go, thank you very much for joining us today, and I hope this has been interesting. Covered quite a bit of ground, I think, and geographically as well as different aspects of assessment work that we're undertaking. There's also been some quite lively conversation, I think, in the text chat box as you've been presenting here, and I see that that Maria has also come back in one of those. So maybe there might be a couple of things that can be picked up with the text chat aspects. So for those of you who are able to stay for a few minutes, I did want to give an opportunity just to reopen the floor, because I think it seems like it's been a long time since before COVID, and I know there's been a lot of interesting work going on earlier in the year and also over the summer. So I just really wanted to give people the opportunity just to talk about any projects they're involved with or aware of, and possibly anything which maybe they might be interested in covering in future sessions as well. Do feel free to put your hand up or just turn your mic and just launch straight in.
I don't know if this is the appropriate, but I just wanted to mention that I am doing work on looking in quite a lot of detail at marking practices, and I don't take a traditional education type of perspective. I use ethnography and literacy studies. I work in the School of Languages and Applied Linguistics, and I don't know if that's the kind of thing that you're interested in. I don't have a big funding project going on to support it. I'm just getting on with it in my research time. That's Jackie speaking.
Thanks for that, Jackie. So if I understood well, you're exploring the marking practices within your faculty, isn't it?
Well, my work isn't just based on the OU, but what I'm trying to do this year is if you like, do a pilot for a larger cross-institutional study, which I'm going to start in my own backyard, teaching level 1 undergraduates in the School of Languages and Applied Linguistics, and I want I chair a module, and I'm hoping to sort of pilot some of the data gathering methods. I'm trying to get a very, very holistic picture of what's going on, and I'm trying to sort of work out how to incorporate some fine-grained stuff, like, for example, screen capture, maybe even eye tracking and things like that, so that I can get a really sort of comprehensive picture of what people are doing when they're marking the assignments.
Actually, that's very interesting. When we designed the interview questions, one part of the interview was focusing on understanding how actually AIs are marking the scripts. And what we found out was that there is a great variation of practices. They are not really consistent or aligned, although this idea of feedback sandwich approach was quite common across ALs. So I think what you are doing sounds very interesting. I mean, I would be happy to have a separate chat with you about that and perhaps share some more specific details from the project and what we know up to now.
Thank you. I've taken a screenshot, which I think has got your email in it. So we'll be in touch. Thank you, Thea.
Thanks, Jackie. We still have some, I guess, a hardcore of 9 participants. So thank you very much for continuing to join us. Does anyone else want to either turn the mic on or drop something in the chat box?
Yes, my name is Annika, and I've typed a couple of things earlier, and I'm sorry that they're mostly wise flow system questions, so if you're not the right person to answer them, that's absolutely fine. I was just wondering, you mentioned that in this particular study, the ALs were asked to mark online, and I appreciate that, but in principle, ALs could download the assignments and mark offline. Do I understand that right? And you also mentioned that they can't annotate the text. Does that mean that the way the system works, the feedback isn't linked to a particular position in the file, or how does it work?
So in terms of the offline comment, because the whole idea was to, I mean, the system is a web-based system, so we worked online.
Yeah.
This is the reason why we ask them to mark online, because that is the basic functionality of the system. But this does not mean that we made a decision as to restrict it online. That's why we're doing the exercise. We are trying to explore the requirements of AELs and what we could do, what changes we can do to the system, because we are given, I mean, yes, the basic functionality, but we are doing this study in collaboration with the Uniwide, the company who is designing the system, and the purpose is to find out what changes we can make to better accommodate the needs of OU ALs. So the second thing you raised was the annotation. So indeed, you can see on the left-hand side of the screen the text, and on the right-hand side you can assign comments to certain bits of the text of the assignment, but you cannot really go on the TMA and correct typos, for example, because it's a PDF that is not editable at the moment. But again, it's something that we are exploring to see whether, I mean, for me, the rationale of AELs that this is a way to model effective writing practices. It's a very important one that we should consider and inform how we can redesign or improve the design of the system in the future.
Yes, and I mean, I work in a...
Sorry, I was just going to say that it's so essential that I don't think it's an option. It just couldn't, I don't think it would work at all if it wasn't an option.
And also, I think it seems that it's more essential for some disciplines or faculties or modules compared to others. For example, the language, we are very strong in favor of that because they said that this is part of what they need to learn. So, I mean, I can definitely see what you're saying.
That's great. Thank you, Anika. And yeah, find my throat there. And also Chris, Liz, Anton for your comments in the text chat. I'm aware we're moving towards 10 past, so maybe I might suggest that it sounds like there's a number of interesting conversations that can carry on after this meeting. I'd just like to thank everybody for their contributions today. Thanks to Chris and to Thea, obviously, and I think it worked quite well having Chris pre-recorded there. It was almost like he was with us. And I have already forwarded the thanks that were expressed in the chat box to him, so he'll be pleased to see that too. I'm not quite sure when our next SIG event is, but as always, if anyone has any thoughts or suggestions about what they would like to see or to do in those events, then please let me know, because these events are for everyone. So I'm always happy to talk further about that. But if there's nothing else, I'd just like to again say thanks to everyone for joining us, and also thank you to Christina, who's done an absolutely amazing job for managing all the audio visual and the PowerPoint presentation so seamlessly, and for setting all this up. So thanks again to her too. So I think that's it. Thank you very much, and I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their afternoons. So take care.
Thank you, Simon and Christina.